somebody who came in and we were able to make some calls and work this out in the last 72 hours, somebody whose legacy of writing, of activism, knows no bounds, and I'm sure has motivated many of you all, the great Dr. Cornel West. Somebody whose writings on Palestine I first read about 15 years ago, and somebody who I would see through the years for her constant support, not only Mumia Abu-Jamal, but for the constant support around Palestine, what we need to do to free all people. And you can get those books actually at the register as well. Susan Abu Hawa. Yeah. Free Palestine, free Palestine. And to her left, the beauty of Philadelphia is that I don't care what neighborhood you come from, you can get some books in the local bookstore. And shout out to Uncle Bobby's Books out in Germantown. All right. But also shout out to his work, on the griot and on Al Jazeera and as a scholar activist and on the front lines. And if he's called, he shows up. Dr. Mark Mahmoud. So we got a special audio clip. Thank you, Mark, for that. And thank you, Mumia Abu-Jamal.
Peace, everybody. You are listening to the Classroom and the Cell podcast. I am Mark Lafmont Hill, and I am joined by
Mumia Abu-Jamal. Who else?
Who else, man? The man, the myth, the legend. Look, brother, we are in Philadelphia right now. I am, and we are preparing for a panel with the great brother, Dr. Cornel West, who, as you know, is running for president. I'm also joined by the Palestinian freedom fighter, my dear sister, Susan Abu Hawa. I'm also joined by Pam Africa, the Minister of Confrontation, the Philadelphia legend, your sister, my sister. We all here together. And, of course, Gabe Bryant is moderating our conversation. But I said, since we are here about to have this amazing conversation at the Making Worlds bookstore in West Philadelphia, I said, let me bring Mumia in, because they said we're going to be talking Mumia. I said, well, look, I got Mumia on the phone in a minute, so let's rap a little bit so that people can hear your voice as well, man. Talk to me about, first of all, our dear brother Cornel West. As you know, he's running for president, taking some heat for it, gotten a whole lot of love for it.
When you think about this, when you listen to reporters talk about elections and campaigns, what do they talk about most? They don't talk about votes much, but they talk about money a great deal. And they rate candidates based on how much money they bring to the campaign. And I've always wondered why they did that, and then it dawned on me. What is that money spent on? That money is spent on media, on commercials. So it's the media talking about money that goes to the media, and they become the medium through which people hear the ideas, or at least the projections of political candidates. And I say that Cornel is symbolic because he's not part of that program. For one thing, he's not a multi-zillionaire. He doesn't have the resources that most political figures have, but he does have ideas. And when you think about it, ideas should be the most important currency in every political campaign, except in America, where money rules all things. Remember cream? And so,
yes, sir.
when you think about the struggles that this man has seen and studied and talked about and been a part of.
This is a call from
Pennsylvania State Correctional Institution, Mahanoy.
This call is subject to recording and monitoring.
People forget that just a few short years ago, Cornel was threatened with death by white supremacists who were armed with rifles and in uniform in Charleston. And he was in a church that was attacked. And thank the ancestors he got out, but, you know, he was attacked essentially because of who he is and the voice that he had and the ideas that animate him as a democratic soldier. You know, he is a man who has spoken truth to power since his youth, and has been a remarkable public intellectual and scholar who has really thought about the biblical term, the least of these, and the Phanonian term, the wretched of the earth, and spoken on behalf of the poor, the down-pressed. And that makes him quite exceptional.
You know, one of the things that Cornel has been particularly vocal about over the last few months, in particular, certainly since October 7th, has been the U.S. and Israel's role in this genocide in Gaza. Just a few days ago, if not a week ago now, I heard Cornel refer to Joe Biden, President Joseph Robinette Biden, to be precise, for you dignified folk, about he's been calling him a war criminal. He's been calling him a war criminal. And that type of provocative language, that type of courageous speech has been necessary, I think, in this moment where we're pretending that the U.S. is playing a mediator role when, in fact, it is providing the weapons, the money, and the political coverage to allow this imperial war, not even war at this point, genocide, to occur. So when you hear Cornel West out here in the world talking about Palestine, calling out war crimes, and calling for a vision of liberation and justice that doesn't hinge on some liberal two-state solution where Palestinians are still oppressed, even though that two-state solution ain't never going to happen. When you hear him talking about not just, finding a warm and fuzzy democratic vision to hold on to, but an actual radical vision of the world that takes care of the vulnerable. When you hear all of that, what does it make you think? What value do you see that adding to this public conversation and to this political conversation, especially as it pertains to Palestine, but really everywhere that there are, as you said, wretched of the earth?
It warms my heart to hear Cornel speak this kind of truth in this kind of time, in this kind of context and conflict between not Israel and Hamas, as is traditionally reported in the corporate media, but as we've discussed earlier, this is a war between the state of Israel, a settler colonial state, against the people of Palestine. If you think about it in sheer numerical terms, the greatest suffering has been sustained by an estimated 10,000 children who are no longer here. Their mothers, their fathers, their brothers and sisters. And, you can count the death of Hamas people perhaps in the hundreds. But when the Palestinian people, it's in the tens of thousands. And that's not even disputed. This is a war against the people of Palestine because this super right, ultra right-wing government is moving to transfer, and they speak about it openly over there, to transfer the Palestinian population out of Gaza to make settler space, to steal whatever land they can take in the name of security. but it's about, I'll use the term that I've always used when I've written about this, and I think it fits, at least historically. When the Nazis invaded people's countries and took their land, they said they needed Lebensraum, German for living room. The Zionists are doing the same thing today on Palestinian territory. And no one, other than Cornel West, is speaking out about it. So he's to be applauded.
Now, the other thing is something that I think you know about. I can't say for sure, but I'm pretty sure you know about. Political prisoners. Talk to me about what it means at this moment to keep the conversation alive about political prisoners.
Cornel has written about this, has introduced writers such as myself in books, and also spoken publicly about the move, political prisoners, about myself, and about others. And he's done it fearlessly. He's done it with love and attention and time and care. And, you know, most people will say there's no such thing, but every state has prisoners of the state. Every state has prisoners of the state because the state is the enforcer in the state, right? And those who oppose or criticize or dissent from the state are enemies of the state. And I think about Evelyn Williams, right? Most people don't know who she is. Well, she was the aunt of Assata Shakur. And early after Assata Shakur got busted, she was her lawyer. And she was a tremendously effective lawyer, right? She got acquittal after acquittal after acquittal.
Yes.
And she wrote a book called Inadmissible Evidence.
Yes, I love that book.
Huh? Yeah.
Yeah.
Remember what she says? She says every black person who goes in a white courtroom is a political prisoner because there is a cost laid against that person for being black in a white courtroom that does not attach to a white person who enters that courtroom. You pay a tax, a price for going into that courtroom because that's the nature of the system, right? We used to be able to see that in other contexts, let's say apartheid. Or think about Palestine. We've been talking about Palestine. The people in Palestine, when they go to court in the apartheid state of Israel, they go to military courts. And it's clearer there. It's not so clear here because of neoliberalism. But if you look, you can see it.
We, as Cornel said, we deodorize it. You know, we don't sit with the funk of it.
No. And well, that sounds like a jazz fan, don't it?
Yeah. Well, you know, Cornel gonna mix the jazz and the blues in there. That's how he do it. He's a blues man.
I know. And he talks about blues people, and I got several of his records where he's singing in the jump.
Yo, that's what I need from y'all, bro. I need you and Cornel to do an album. I told you,
You have 1 minute left.
I found out you had them vocals, and now you know Cornel gonna make an album between the two of y'all, man. Y'all might get us free just with the music.
Well, listen, ask Cornel what we did when we got together. He come up here with some other good brothers, James Cone, and we started singing. We were singing, we're a winner, and never let anybody say that you can't make it. Come on now. Come on now. We singing in the visiting room. I'm like, go ahead, brother.
That's, I wish I could say I was surprised, but you get Cornel, the great James Cone, rest in peace, and that troublemaker Mumia Abu-Jamal, all three of y'all crazy Negroes together, man. Y'all gonna make music, y'all gonna theorize, y'all gonna get us free, y'all gonna do all the things, man. I'm so glad y'all had that time together. And
Yes, sir.
when you come home, and you are going to come home, we're going to make sure that we get that band together. Cornel going to be right there in
Get
the
that
front.
band together. We're going to put...
Thank you for using Securus. Goodbye.
Love you too, man. On the move. All right, everybody, you've been listening to the Classroom in the Cell podcast. Welcome my hill, Mamiya Abu-Jamal. Make sure you continue to check out all the content that we have. You can get it by going to the YouTube channel, Mark Lamont Hill Official. You go to the Mark Lamont Hill Official YouTube channel.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much. And free Mumia, man. And like Mark said, you know, not perhaps, not if, not maybe, but when Mumia comes home, right? Yeah. I want to also acknowledge, you know, as we saw them come in, and as was said by Mumia as well on the remarks, we got somebody also who inspired me when I was in college, when she visited Pitt University back in '99. Ramona Africa's in the building. And to her right, we got Janine Africa, we got Janet Africa. I see Eddie Africa in the back. So these folks who came home to Move 9 when everybody said it was impossible for them to come home, now they sit here today here in Macon Rose Bookstore. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that beautiful? So I want to get first to our questions, and this is for Mama Pam. You know, we heard from, obviously, the situation was going on with Mumia. We know that we've sort of raised the stakes around his health care, what's happening right now in the prison. We know that you also were on Black Power Media talking about your most recent visit to him and what you saw with regards to his health. So if you can, please give us a quick update on what you saw when you visited him as well, and we're going to also have some other remarks.
Okay, first I want to thank everybody for coming out on this very short notice, and thank the bookstore. I mean, everybody, we just put this thing together in a couple of days. Nobody knew, but it happened because it had to happen. I want to acknowledge Brother Issa, and for him to come up before I speak, because he is Wadia and Mumia's oldest son. Right. And he was the one who called me and alerted me about what it is that he saw. So he's going to tell you about that.
I want to thank everyone for coming out. This is definitely a surprise to me. I didn't know I was going to say anything. Thanks to my aunt Gabe right here. It was very saddening when I went to see Mumia. And I was seeing him last year, the day after my mother's birthday. And then to see him this year, it was night and day. I mean, he walked up into the visiting room, and when he walked up to me, I didn't know who he was until he stood exactly in my face like this. He didn't look well at all. I mean, I didn't notice him. I have pictures in my phone where he does have some locks. You know, I mean, his hair was balding a little bit, but now to just see how that dramatic change. And one thing that he said to me, he said, the losing of your mother, he said it just broke him down. And, you know, and I had to tell him, like I said, Ab, I need you to continue to keep on fighting. But he's so scarred from my mother passing. And when I left, it was my birthday weekend when I went to see him. So I was going skiing. I had a bunch of friends in an Airbnb. And I was about an hour away. And I just cried all the way home, all the way back to where I was staying at the time. So that's just pretty much, and I appreciate you guys for listening, and thank you guys for everything that you do, and, you know, free Mumia.
Right. This is a very emotional time. And before I go any further, we pulled this together so that we can bring people to the front line. We need help in order to get Mumia out here. We were successful in getting him off of death row when this entire government, said that they was going to kill him. It was the power that was released of the people to force this government, to take him off of death row. During the whole time Mumia was on death row, he had colds, he had a little ache and pain there. But at the point that Mumia was released from death row, the FOP and Maureen Faulkner, that's Officer Faulkner's wife, Maureen Mokovich, said that when he come off of death row, that they was going to make sure, they said he gonna burn in hell, and that this is where they gonna get their, I'll use the word revenge because I can't think of what they said. And that, he was gonna die there. And it's not, he's the reason, and wait a minute. Did you hear Mumia speaking there? He sound good, though. He really sound good. But the face is something completely different. Brought Issa down to tears the whole time. I went up to see him, and Noelle Hanrahan said she was called herself preparing me for what it was I was going to see. And I listened to him on the podcast too. Didn't have an idea that he was, in this condition. But when I saw him, took me a minute, and he walked over and he said, he says, my hair. So no, it wasn't the hair. Because I didn't see it bald. I didn't see the hair come back. But what I was looking at is the beginning of the cycle that almost killed Mumia a few years ago. His skin, is dark. His arm is like this shirt right here. Somebody give Mumia some water. Yeah. And his fingers were swollen. And his fingers were swollen. Can people hear me in the back? Yeah. Okay. But I'm telling you, this is really, really hard seeing him and knowing where this is leading. A few years ago, the battle was for Mumia's life. He had got completely encased in a dark skin, that looked like alligator skin, and looked like when you look at, how a fish, breathes and you can see the gills, you can see the skin up under that. That's how that was. His ear, I'm not talking about right now, and I'm talking about what I see coming back. His ears, was coming off his face. All this part of his neck looked like very dark chicken skin. And he had scratched himself so much he had gouged sores, all over his body. Looking at him last week, Mumia's face, right here, his eyebrows, they were scratched off. Mumia has been itching 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and just tearing his skin up with scratches, his back, all this stuff. I just want y'all to understand that when we pull this together, all of us is here for Mumia, but it's what are we going to do? And more of the details, it's just a whole lot of talk. And the thing is, right now, as we're sitting here, Mumia is, he said there's not a spot that he's not itching in, not one spot. Yeah, I'm not usually
No.
short for words, but
No,
you
but
know,
that's-
when you see what I saw, and you've seen the worst of this before, and you sitting before him again, and you see it coming back because we battled these monsters
Yeah.
in order to get him what was known as a hepatitis C cure. They wouldn't give it to him because of $1,000, well, that was the excuse at first. $1,000 a pill, and you had to take it for 90 days. And this movement here is one that is all inclusive because we were told that you'll never be able to get that medication for him because you would have to get it for everybody. And everybody's going to want it, and that's going to block it. Our intentions is to get it for the everybody. Mumia is a part of the everybody.
That's right.
So there was a whole lot of things, and I want to say we short for time,
Yeah.
Right here today. And but it was a constant battle. These people are hell-bent on killing Mumia through medical neglect because they couldn't kill him, with the sentence of death, because we are able to beat that back. We have got to rise up right now.
That's right. That's right.
And so people who are instrumental in here dealing with churches, we need those churches. We had a bad behind brother that came from Arkansas. He was a 20-year judge. He had his own church, and he laid the rules down of why Clemens should release Mumia. Judge Tucker, while we in this Black History Month, the minister was black. Judge Tucker was a black man, and who laid the rules down and gave Mumia the right to an appeal. Judge Clemens, who is a black woman judge, and despite all the evidence of innocence that was presented to her, all the law as is written that Mumia should be home, she's thumbs down. This woman, this system is responsible for everything that's happening to Mumia. When we went to court for Mumia's health, it was found out how they had manipulated papers, lying, and also that, Mumia would not get a cure. Mumia has had open heart surgery. And one of the guards that went to the prison, to the hospital with him, and said he got so sick standing there because Mumia's heart was over here and Mumia's laying on the table.
Right.
And he had open heart surgery. All these things that happened to him is because he's in jail illegally. And I'm saying we are not without the power to bring him home. We have everything that there is. We just need to utilize
That's right.
it. And people who believe in
organized.
politics, go to these politicians. You're not without. Do they want an audio, video, TV, book, whatever the hell they want it on? We have the evidence to pull him out. Journalists. I wish everybody was, and thank you so much for hearing the journalists that's here that, have been helping. But, we need these other ones to rise up. These people, just like they're doing in Gaza, is what they're doing up to in that prison. And,
on that point, because I want to get to your second question also, for you, Dr. West, as you hear what, Mama Pam is talking about, right? We're talking about medical neglect. We're talking about, decades of, health challenges on the inside. And you had a phrase about Joe Biden's role in mass incarceration. You called it crimes against Black humanity. Yeah. Can you speak on, what's happening right now, the impacts of mass incarceration on our communities, Black and brown and poor communities, but also the issue of elder abuse as you see it as well?
Yeah, let me first say I'm just blessed to be here in this consecrated space. I appreciate the leaders who established this space, and each and every one of you coming out. And I just want to say directly to my dear brother Esau that your father, he's a great man. I come out of the revolutionary Christian biblical tradition. He or she is greatest among you will be a servant of the people. Will suffer, struggle, shudder, and sacrifice because of your love for the people. What we heard with our dear sister Pam, He's undergoing that because he loves us. He's willing to sacrifice. He's willing to take the hits. It reminds me of Martin Luther King Jr. Daddy King told me Martin Luther King Jr. was in a paddy wagon for 4.5 hours driven from Atlanta to Reedsville prison with a German Shepherd in there with him, and only 2 of them in there in the dark. And when Brother Martin got out of the paddy wagon and Daddy King was there, he said he had tears in his eyes. He couldn't walk a straight line. But all he could say was, this is the cross we must bear for the freedom of our people. Look at this, brother. Same thing in Arizona. Same thing with Fannie Lou Hamer. Bonnie on the head of Ida B. Wells Barnett. We can go on and on and on. Mumia Abu-Jamal stands in that cloud of witnesses, and we got the son to tell him directly. He's a great man. He's a good man. He's a tender man. He's a gentle man. He's a sweet man. He is one of us. He is the extension of the best of our people, of our tradition, of our struggle, and he's a love warrior. He's a love warrior. That's why we sang Curtis Mayfield together. He was in tune, I was out of tune. He didn't mind. And it means then that so often we can find the most courageous, the love warriors, freedom fighters, joy sharers, and the wounded healers in mass incarceration. Because the system has declared war on black people for 400 years. And too often, those who respond to that challenge get assassinated or incarcerated. And we end up with these milquetoast leaders walking around peacocks. Look at me, look at me. I'm so successful. Where's your courage? Where's your love of everyday people? That's what we're talking about. And so anytime you talk about mass incarceration, we should always begin with the love, the courage, the service, the sacrifice, the style, the smile, and you can still feel in his voice a delicacy. It reminds you of the voice of a Marvin Gaye or a David Ruffin or Ted Mills. Brother Keith Benson played drums with Teddy Pendergrass for 22 years. Wave your hand, Brother Keith. He know what I'm talking about. Or Teddy Pendergrass. Because that's part of our movement too. That's part of our struggle too. And our people come in a lot of different forms. Sometimes they're Muslims like Malcolm. Sometimes they're Christians like Fannie Lou. Sometimes they're Buddhists like Bell Hooks. Sometimes they're agnostic like James Baldwin. Sometimes they're gay, lesbian, trans. We got a whole variety of voices in our movement. Mumia Abu-Jamal will always sit at the height because of the unbelievable level of sacrifice and love. And I see that in Ramona. I see it in Pam. It's there in our dear Sister Susan and this brother, younger generation. My God. Lord have mercy. I'm just like Luther come back from the dead in intellectual form. Love you, Luther Vandross. Your legacy still going on as intellectual, still going on as truth teller, still going on and making connection. And I want to just end this by reading a poem by the daughter of one of the greatest writers in the modern world, Richard Wright. You all know Richard Wright, native son, black boy. Yes. And this is Julia Wright, the daughter. And she sends us poems every day, doesn't she? Every day. And I stop wherever I am. In my 7 events I'm doing a day, I get my note from her. I said, everything got stopped. She said, this is for Mumia Abu-Jamal. Hoaxers, spinners, corporate narrative controllers, thin blue veilers, hired magicians of the verb and their crooked cohorts tell lies in 2 ways, by commission and by omission. Either they get publicly tangled in their own published myths, or they are truth retentive and prefer the darkness of silence to perpetrate their hidden deeds. Behind the walls of our prisons, Mumia and the incarcerated elders are being lethally poisoned. Not directly by commission, not by the too incriminating arsenic or cyanide, but by the silent, deliberate denial of adequate food, water, medicine, and air as a human right. That omission, just as cruel and humane as the Gaza blockade in slow, agonizing torture and a war crime, just as Palestine is a laboratory to battle test new weapons made in USA, or prisons or vivo test tubes to experiment the genocidal methods of slow death row, always spreading to our black, brown, and indigenous people. Gaza and Mumia rhyme. That's Julia Wright, straight out of Paris, Morocco, and other places.
Thanks so much for that. Thank you to Mama Julia, as always, for her amazing poetry. As I get to Susan, I want to acknowledge, briefly, I see in the audience some amazing organizers with the Philly Palestine Coalition. So if you could raise your hand, show them some love, show them some love, show them some love. Philly Palestine Coalition. They've been doing work for the past 4 months. I see y'all. All right. They've been shutting it down and raising the stakes, and Susan's been, at the center and in the middle of it all. And so as we talk about mass incarceration and this issue of solidarity across land masses, as it were, between the U.S., black folks, black and brown people here, but also looking at the prisoners as well in Palestine, and just that intersection of mass incarceration, what we're seeing, in Gaza, in the West Bank, but also the violence and the crime that we see here as well, the persecution on college campuses. Can you provide some context for us all to kind of distinguish those two realities for us?
So first of all, it's a real privilege to just be surrounded by the power and the light and the generosity of so many warriors, not just on this panel, but in the audience, Sister Ramona, Janine, and Janet, and Isa, and all of you. I think, when you come from a society of struggle, whether it's the legacy of settler colonialism, enslavement, neocolonialism, oftentimes our prisoners are central to our society. The prisons are sometimes where the moral force is located. They are the freest people among us, and Mumia is a prime example. And for us as Palestinians, our leaders, most of them have either been assassinated or they're locked up. So prison for us is not a place of criminality. It's the place where we find moral clarity. When in talking about the similarities between the US and Israel, I think we shouldn't be talking about similarities between two systems, but rather parts of the same whole, organs of the same body. And, as people, we intuitively recognize this. There is an intuitive mutual solidarity between Palestinians and Black America, and also in Africa and former colonies. For us Palestinians, a lot of the people that we look up to as political leaders and our revolutionaries are people like Malcolm X, are like Angela Davis, SNCC, Muhammad Ali, the Panthers, and also people like Nelson Mandela, Robert Sobukwe, Steve Biko, Patrice Lumumba, Thomas Sankara. And there is, Israel and their satellites in this country, a lot of organizations that sort of bill themselves as civil rights groups, but in fact are agents of Israel, have spent a lot of money being really in concern over Black Palestinian solidarity, have spent millions and millions targeting HBCUs, sending top and up-and-coming young Black leaders on all expense paid propaganda tours to Israel. Some of the people you recognize, like Bakari Sellers, and others. But despite this intense labor and massive investment, it has not gone their way, because when something happens, there is, whether people know the details or not, we as human beings can have visceral reactions. So for example, when we witnessed the murder of George Floyd, Palestinians throughout Palestine immediately recognized that visual, because all of our young people at one point, or the majority of them, have found their heads or their necks under the knee or the boot of an Israeli soldier. And, you know, likewise, another such moment was when Tamir Rice was murdered. It happened that just a couple weeks before, a young boy by the name of Abdurrahman Abedallah, the same age, was murdered by a sniper, an Israeli sniper, in a park. And so there's a memorial in the Aida refugee camp. That boy was killed, and it bears a painting of Tamir and Abdurrahman. And likewise, you'll find murals, I know of at least 2, of George Floyd. And for Black folks, like a recent such mutual recognition was in November during the so-called prisoner exchange or hostage exchange, whichever term you prefer. A lot of people in this country learned for the first time that there's something called administrative detention, where Palestinians are held for years, sometimes decades, without charge or trial. And the reactions to this knowledge were actually split along racial lines in this country. You know, a lot of white folks sort of were questioning, like, well, what's the reason? You know, they're looking for some logic. But I think for most Black folks, there was an immediate recognition, like, because, you know, 2/3 of Black folks in jail are awaiting trial. They've never been convicted. And, you know, we all know of Khalif Browder, was the prime example, the tragic example. And so, you know, I just say this to highlight this kind of mutual recognition among us, that despite the propaganda, despite the media, despite the money, the campaigns and the targets, there is still a mutual recognition. And I think both Palestinians and Black Americans find political homes in internationalism, in solidarity with indigenous movements and indigenous and movements of just, you know, liberation movements in general. And then I'll just wrap up real quickly, because on the flip side of that are these shared financial and profit interests that span the spectrum of cross continents. So, for example, just three corporations: Siemens, Motorola, and G47. All 3 of these companies are so heavily invested in mass incarceration of Black and brown and poor bodies in this country and Palestinians in Israel. They provide the software, the infrastructure, the surveillance, the canteens, you know. It's all run by private for-profit companies. So, and that's what I mean by organs of the same body.
Thank you so much.
I'm getting the signal to stop. Thank you.
Thank you. No, thank you, Susan. Thank you so much. And certainly, this work is so important as we find ourselves on, I believe, the 128th day of this genocide, frankly, of this devastation, of this second Nakba that they're creating. As Motaz and Bisana said, you know, where else do we have to go? And so I'm reminded of that. So thank you, Susan. For you, Mark, we often talk about how the personal is political, the political is personal, and we just heard this audio clip with you and Mumia. And you started your podcast recently based on your 2012 book, The Classroom and the Cell, that you and Mumia both wrote. It's, to my knowledge, on both public and in private, that's been a very profound relationship. Can you talk a bit about, what you've learned from Mumia through the years and how he's inspired your work around abolition, around Palestine, and around political prisoners?
Yeah, thank you. And I echo everything that everyone else has said about how important and powerful and beautiful a space this is, and beautiful a day and a moment this is. And I send my love to all the organizers and all the people who are here. Really hard to even hear, as Pam is describing what Mumia is going through. It's so hard to hear. I talk to Mumia at least twice a week, usually 3 times a week. And if you were to talk, Mumia might be the most unselfish person I've ever met in my life. I mean, even the day Issa went to the jail and saw him, he called Pam. Pam called me 47 times, right? Because I was doing something, but I was like, Pam, it's Pam, it must be. So I pick up and she tells me what's going on with Mumia. And then Mumia happens to call me maybe an hour later. And I'm like, yo, man, what's going on? I'm fine, man, let's just do the podcast. No, it's just my hair. And he doesn't want you to worry. He doesn't want you to stress. He doesn't want you to talk. Every December, but I'll tell you about the first December. The first December, Mumia and I were talking. He's the most upbeat person you want to talk to as well. I feel bad, like having a bad day around him. You know what I mean? Like, fuck you, man. It's so sad. And he just sounded so down. And I couldn't figure out why. And he was like, I'm fine, just, a little under the weather, blah, 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 blah. We talking. It wasn't until the next day that I realized that was the anniversary of the day that he had been captured by the state. He didn't want us to be thinking and talking about that. I talked to him this December. Same thing. He was like, well, it's around the time Wad died, it's around the time, Samia. He went that direct, but still never about him. When I talked to him on Friday, I said, look, we're doing an event for Cornel, but we also talking about you, we talking about political prisoners. He only wanted to talk about Cornel in Palestine. Yeah. I was like, can you say something about Cornel for president? That's just him. So part of it is, so it's even more jarring when I hear and watch the state's commitment to wanting to kill him. Because that's all this is. As our sister said, slow death row. But they want to torture Mumia, and they want to make an example of Mumia, so that no one else dares to speak against the state, so that no one else dares to challenge authority in the way that he does. He's one of the most, not just important prison intellectuals, but one of the most important intellectuals this country has ever produced, and that's why they are so committed to keeping him caged for the rest of his life, and that's why we got to be even more committed to getting him free, right? And I think the thing that I learned the most, we decided, Classroom to Cell was his idea, the name of the book, right? When we did the book in 2012. I think the most profound thing I've learned from Mumia since we did that book and even before is that Classroom and the Cell don't reflect our respect positions, right? It's more complicated than that. Because there's a way, and Mumia will tell you this all the time, we outside, not in the cell, but we are some unfree people, right? And there's a way that he has more intellectual freedom. I don't want to romanticize the prison. We want to get him out. There's no virtue in the prison. But there's a way that he has mustered the courage and the muster and the spiritual might and the wisdom to speak courageous truths when he's got the highest of stakes, right? And he's willing to still make a sacrifice for the people. He's still willing to work and struggle for the people. And that's a level and a kind of freedom that I can never fully even imagine, much less embrace. It's abstract to me. So I never want to feel too good or too free on this side. He always forces me to keep track of how intellectually unfree we are, how unfree we are based on capitalism, how unfree we are based on professional opportunity. It is so easy to not say anything about Palestine right now. It's so much more easy as free people, right? If you want to get a certain job, if you want to not get on a certain list, if you want to run for a certain office. And he's a constant reminder to me that that's not how we should be moving in the world. And I think that's the thing. And the other thing, as I said, is his constant humility. It's this constant sacrifice. It's like, I remember we started rapping in 2007 on a regular basis. I just got a random phone call from him. I actually written a piece in the Metro, if y'all remember, Scepter Riley used to write for the Metro. And I had written something on the Move 9. And we were, so he saw it and got my number, I'm sure from Pam, and she is the connector of all things. And I just got this phone call, you have a call from Pennsylvania State Prison. And it said, I thought it was gonna be my brother. My brother had been locked up for about 8 years at that point. And so I thought it was him, but it said Mumia Abu Jamal. So I'm like, two, or one, whatever the button was at the time. I'm pressing the button. And he was like, you think they're gonna win? You think you're gonna win? I didn't have to know I didn't have to ask. He was talking about Obama, right? We knew, right? And I was like, I don't know, motherfucker might win. And we started talking about all the reasons why that would be troublesome. And we started unpacking how problematic it was. And he had a level of critical insight and a commitment to deep study where he would make this connection to that connection that you rarely see. And so much, and we laugh, we joke, we tell, he's a ridiculous person, he's silly. He's one of my favorite voicemails, I'm gonna send it to you, you should have it. It's him and Wadia calling me doing voice impersonations. And I'm like, first I'm like, y'all get a room, because it's like my parents, it's just moo moo and wah wah. But they are so, he's just an amazing whole person. But in addition to that, and then I'll pass the mic back, he still, in addition to all his silliness and brilliance and creativity, he's also just a passionate soul committed to deep study. And at a moment where people don't think enough and don't read enough and don't make connections, and TikTok and YouTube and Twitter become the kind of arbiter of what's right and wrong without any analysis. We got a president saying he saw photos of tragedies in Gaza that never happened. I mean, this is where we are right now. You can't trust anybody. He doesn't let anybody off the hook. He's always making the connections and reading and studying and connecting. And he inspires me to be a closer reader and a deeper thinker. And probably a better person. I mean, he's just extraordinary. So I'm blessed to know him and to call him a friend and to be able to build with him all the time. Yeah.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark. For you, Dr. West, Mark just kind of said it. He said, Cornel for president. That Mumia said, and what's on the mouths of everybody is we deal with a national crisis. People talking about this engendering of fascism, right? By way of, assaults in the pipeline. We have the persecution of the Cop City folks down in Atlanta. We have even Nancy Pelosi talking about folks who fight for Palestine should be investigated by the FBI, right, Susan? We have all these issues, and people are trying to deny the culpability. We need you to break down who's culpable for engendering this culture of fascism. We could say it's Trump, we could say it's Biden, we could say, see, all of the above. Break it down for us.
No, I think we got to look back to the best of our great tradition of great truth tellers and justice seekers who told us that the American empire would be undergoing decay and decline, disintegration and dissolution. And it happens to most empires that suffer from military overreach. You got 800 military units around the world, special operations in 130 countries. So most of the money goes to military. They don't have a penny when it comes to education, jobs, healthcare, safe communities, and so forth. The corruption of elites, which reinforces a professional managerial class of cowardliness and complacency. You see? So everybody concerned about their career but can't come up with what their calling is. Everybody got a brand, but when you ask them what your cause is, it's hard for them to discern it. And they actually think that it's all about success, and they give up on what Brother Moon is concerned about, which is moral and spiritual greatness and empowering those friends for known call the wretched of the earth, and willing to pay any cost. And Mumi is part of that cloud of witnesses. He would always want us to acknowledge he's in a choir, a community. The anthem of black folk is lift every what? Not echo. Too many of our leaders are echoes of silos. When you find your voice, like your jazz women and blues men, you got something to say about truth. You got something to say about justice, and you manifest it in your deeds. Now, Muslim brothers and sisters have a notion of immortal deeds. Those are the deeds you give back to God because God gave you life. And it becomes a joy to be able to give it back. And what form is immortal deeds? Serving the people. That's where the Black Panther Party come from. That's where League Revolutionary come. That's where MOVE come from. We can go a whole host of different organizations and so forth. But the challenge becomes, how do you do that in such a way that you generate solidarity? Because the powers that be as an empire is dissolving the organized greed and institutionalized hatred and routinized indifference toward the vulnerable. They want to keep folk divided. They want us to look at each other through white supremacist lens, patriarchal lens, imperial lens, rather than deep human connection of suffering, beginning with the least of these, as poor and working people. And that's one of the reasons why the Mumias and others become the examples to say, if you really love the people at the deepest level, this is what you're going to have to go through. And we say, there's a variety of different forms of it. Most of us don't have what Mumia had. You know what I mean? Just like most of us, you know, we can't sing like Nat King Cole. We just got to be honest about that. We don't have it. We just raise our voices. But our voices are very important, crucial. And I'm just glad. Is Brother Fish still here? Where is Brother Fish? He's being persecuted right now for his magnificent cartoons telling the truth about Gaza. Give it up to Brother Fish. Give it up to Brother Fish. Definitely, I'm blessed to have him also as the art director of my campaign. Brother Anthony helped bring us together. I got my dear brother Stanley here looking like Malcolm X's third cousin with his black suit. But any moment, any effort ain't nothing but a moment in a movement. It ain't about voting, ain't about no campaign. It's certainly not about a cracked vessel like me running for office. It's about a wave in an ocean. We got to keep the ocean flowing, and we all have different callings and causes and struggles, and we hope with courage so that we all come together with our strengths. That's what's a threat, and that's global. That's not just Philadelphia, New York, and Chicago, but that's Latin America, Asia, Caribbean, Middle East, and so forth. And right now, Gaza is the litmus test. Cat Williams is right. 2024 is the year of truth, exposing lies, exposing crimes. Now, Brother Cat got his own doing it, you know. I love the brother, you know what I mean? We love him now. It's like Richard Pryor and Dick Gregory and Moms Mabley. That's part of my tradition. I ain't apologetic about those black folk, but when they're wrong, I call it out. But when they're telling the truth, we pull it out and try to make it available to everyday people. So once they straighten their backs up, the powers that be start trembling in their boot. Right now, they trembling. Democratic Party is trembling. Democratic Party called me the biggest threat to democracy in 50 years, and I just declared on Monday, and they said that on Friday. And I said, hey, I ain't even had a rally, I ain't had fundraiser. I called Bootsy up, because you know Bootsy Collins and I are so tight, we write songs together. I said, Bootsy, go come to my rally. I said, I'm going to get my bass, but I haven't got my bass, and they say you a threat. I said, brother, when you get funky with that bass, we were going to be a collective threat. But that's a good sign, because when they run it like that, it means that targeting intensifies. You got to be willing to pay the price. But the good news is that the spirit of your witness will be picked up by those who come after. And that's the good news about Brother Mumia. Anytime they talk about freedom and truth and justice in the American empire, you're going to see that smile and that face tied to MOVE, Black Panther Party, a variety of different efforts to bring critique to bear on the American empire. And the solidarity right now of our Palestinian brothers and sisters is a fundamental litmus test. If you can't call for ceasefire and the end of a siege and the end of occupation when you're seeing genocide right before your very face, then you know you're dealing with some milquetoast folk. Sanitized, sterilized, deodorized folk who are afraid of the funk.
Thank you, Dr. West. Thank you. So what I would like and folks, get ready to, we're gonna be doing a Q&A in a few short minutes, not yet, but in a few minutes, we're gonna have a couple more questions, then we're gonna get to it, so prepare your questions. But I wanna have Mama Pam and dear Sister Susan, just give us a call to action, for next steps as we see fit. You already kind of began to allude to some of it with regards to Mumia's case, about how we need to mobilize, galvanize, go to all faith spaces, and use whatever we have. Same for Palestine, same for Mumia Abu Jamal.
Right. Some of the things we did is definitely you got to keep pressure on this government. Right now, Mumia is dealing with a diet that just isn't humane. We have a diet group that is working that consists of Bob Bull, the health committee, Attorney Bob Bull, and he's responsible for the release of Jeruba Ben Wahad, political prisoner. He's responsible for the release of Marshal Eddie Conway and all political prisoners. We need lawyers to come together and deal with this situation. We need people to go, because we went up to Congress. How Mumia got off of death row because we left no stone unturned. Whatever it is that you fit in, that you do best, do it. We have a building now, One Arts. The address? 52nd and Media. We want to start having meetings on Wednesday there. We're looking for another space in order to have more meetings, but we need to set up meetings throughout the city. And, this is not just for Philadelphia. This is for everybody that's listening, because you're already doing it in France. There's not a Wednesday that don't go by that they're not putting out information for Mumia. We did things in the area, and you know what? We need to develop, a new, updated piece of literature to pass out, of like where things are at right now. What the judges, what was their part? How did Mumia wind up here when it was clear that he was supposed to walk? Oh, he was supposed to walk, last year. So we need to get that information out in the way. I need some writers. We need some writers. We need people to come up. What's the skills in this room? That's what we need to know too. And what is it that, you are willing to do? Because the thing is, confront this system and don't give up. And don't make it just about Mumia, because when we did hepatitis C, it wasn't just about Mumia. The concerns, with hepatitis C concerned everybody in the prison. But people did not know that while there was 400 something inside the state of Pennsylvania in prison that had hepatitis C, there was over 7,000 in the streets. We connected, we came together, all those different forces, and went up against this government. The only time that you saw commercials about hepatitis C, because it was the power of the people. Everybody came together and worked and pushed for that. So we're looking for people to join in with us with your skills, no matter, if it's dialing the phone, calling other people to let them know what's going on. April 24th is coming up, having events in February. There's, events that's going on in New York. There's events that's going on. Have some events. If you go to YouTube, all the Mumia, videos, the documentaries, they're all, up there, and invite some people into your communities and show them, and let's make a move. April the 24th, we should shut this mother thinker down. We should shut this. I didn't say what people, I did say that, y'all heard it in here, but what came out my mouth, where I'm coming from. But we have to organize and let these people know we're coming.
Right.
And we're coming with the power of truth. Yeah. And we're not backing down, because it's here for everybody.
Thank you. And I want to get it over to Susan as well, but as you see on the screen, you can continue to use your phones to use this QR code to tap into mobilization Number 4, Mumia, it'll bring you to a link where you can not only begin to read more information, see how you can get some of Mumia's books organized, and also more importantly, even donate to the campaign, to the cause, to the work that has to be done. So utilize your phone. You can tap in with that QR code. It should come up right on your phone. For you, Susan, call to action, next steps.
So I think one of the most important things is to recognize the connections between Mumia, Palestine, Congo, Sudan. It is all connected. We have one cause, and frankly, the epicenter of this oppressive, capitalist, exploitive, thieving, horrific system is in Gaza right now. What happens, I know this before in this space, what happens in this moment will determine our fate as humanity for generations to come. If they succeed, and by they, it is the colonial powers, it is the corporations, it's Israel. If they succeed with their aims in Gaza, we will be slaves to their will for generations to come. So this is the linchpin. And if I believe that we as a people, as collective, as the masses of the world, taking to the streets, making their lives as uncomfortable as we possibly can, disrupting their speeches, disrupting their programs, their universities, blocking their highways, refusing to allow this business as usual shopping and convenient world that doesn't have to look at us, that doesn't have to see us, disrupting that at every turn in any way that you can. We need armies of lawyers to start taking these people to task, these corporations in this country who are funding genocide, and it is a genocide. I spend my days, I'll tell you what I did from 6 o'clock in the morning until I came here. I was desperately trying to figure out how to get some food to a man and his mother who ran out of food 3 weeks ago. Nobody knows what's going on with them. Yesterday, I spent my day trying to figure out how to get some doctors to go get a little boy whose limb needs amputation and who's dying. His body's becoming septic. Nobody can get to him. They cannot get him out of the house because there's snipers everywhere. These are just 2 cases among tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands that we don't even know about. We keep hearing, the numbers themselves they shock the conscience and they beg our belief, but it is so much worse, so much worse. Every diabetic person, every cancer patient, every person on dialysis, they're all dying because there's nothing. Anybody with a herniated disc, they cannot move. They're also dying, and they're not counted among the numbers of the murdered, but they are also in the tens of thousands. 10% of Gaza's population has been murdered or maimed in the span of 3 months. 10%. If we were to apply that here, that would mean wiping out all of Los Angeles, all of New York, all of Chicago, all of Detroit, all of Charlotte, North Carolina, all of Atlanta, with a few more cities to spare. In 3 months, we are devastated. And we need the solidarity, and we need action.
To Mark, I want to, first of all, thank you, Susan, because I think that it's important in these spaces to also remain sober-minded about the realities, even as we're, inspired and motivated and convicted, to just understand the raw truths of what's happening on the ground. For you, Mark, we talk often about, and I saw the book, earlier, Robin D.G. Kelly's book about freedom dreams and radical imaginations. You know, I want us to sort of begin to close this out as far as, you know, how do we continue to sustain a freedom dream and a radical imagination, you know, in spite of all the crisis all around us and the banning of books and Moms for Liberty and it's this and that and all the above. How do we still stay focused on our freedom dreams to create the world that we want to see?
Yeah, that's the heavy question. I think about, that question makes me think of Martin King on April 3rd of '68, when he gives his last speech, and he's sort of given this panoramic view of history, all the places he would be, all the places he would go if the Almighty had come to him and said, "In what era would you want to live? Would you want to live in?" And after he decides he wouldn't want to be in Athens, he wouldn't want to be in Rome, he wouldn't want to be at the door of the Church of Wittenberg, wouldn't want to be during the Great Depression. He said, "I would want to be right here in 1968." He says, "Some will say that's a strange statement. The world's all messed up." And he said, "Only when it is darkest can you see the stars." And I sit with that a lot. We are at a moment of extraordinary disorder, extraordinary violence, extraordinary indifference. On the way here, I'm listening to Susan, and on the way here, Al Jazeera, we ran on the cover of the website right now is a woman and a child laying dead, both killed by Israeli snipers. It's devastating. 2/3 of the people killed are women and children. I mean, there's so many steps. 1% of the child population, over 1% now, has been killed in Gaza since October. There's no other word for it but sick. And yeah, and I spent my day asking them about this, and they're all liars. I mean, there's no other way to put it. Yes. They're just liars. And against the backdrop of all that, we have to figure out how to be hopeful. And for me, it's a couple of things. One, we come from a different tradition. We come from a tradition of justice, of righteousness, of value, of seeing the humanity in every person. I'm not talking about some romantic idea or nothing. I'm talking about even in a revolutionary praxis, right? We recognize the love and humanity in every single person. And so for me, that means that the world we want to build is different. So part of what we remain guided by is a desire and an inspiration to produce the world that is not yet. That world that is not yet. We're a world making world's bookstore, right? We don't want a nation build, like Edom Katachu talks about, right? We don't want to nation build, we want to world make. We don't want to replicate the world of our oppressors. We don't want to take over and be oppressors. We want to create a world of freedom and justice and liberation for everybody. Our open enemies can't imagine that because their only vision of humanity, their only vision of freedom is one where somebody has to be oppressed. Freire, I'm looking at Freire on that shelf there, y'all should read. In Pedagogy of the Oppressed, he talks about that, right? He said, for the oppressed to be is to be like, and to be like is to be like the oppressor. We don't have another sort of conception of humanity or of life outside one of an oppressor-oppressed model that we have access to in the media, that we have access to in politics, that we have access to in everyday speech. But we got one, and that's the one we're fighting for. I remain guided by that. I remain inspired by that. And at a moment where it seems the most impossible because it is dark, that's when I look for those stars. We had a pandemic. And I had Mumia laughing about this the other day. It was a pandemic. And the world was terrified. And them COs started getting COVID. The police officers started getting COVID. Then suddenly they're like, well, you know, that dude with the weed in his pocket, maybe we don't need to stop him. Maybe that guy in the cell that's a nonviolent offender, maybe we can send them home, right? They began to imagine abolitionist possibilities when it was in their interest, right? So at that dark moment of pandemic, the possibility for the world to recognize the possibility of an abolitionist vision that some of us thought was impossible because they told us it was. Many of us are fighting for reparations. And for decades, we've been told, how are you going to do reparations? I mean, who are you going to give it to? How are you going to find out the names? How are you going to get the money? How are you going to do this? How are you going to do that? American capitalism was on its knees during the pandemic. They got them stimmies out so fast. They found names, they found money, they found lists. When American capitalism was at stake, they were able to imagine new possibility. So we no longer have the luxury of impossibility. We can no longer defer or rely on this idea that it can't happen. It can. But it's never going to happen from the state unless we force the state to do so. The state will never do anything that's not in its own interest. So we have to constantly compel the state. But at that same moment, the brightness is watching people who never stood up for Palestine speak up. It was in the midst of a pandemic, watching people downtown in Philadelphia fighting and screaming for George Floyd. It was in Minnesota where they said, you know what, we are no longer going to settle for warmer and fuzzier prisons. We want to defund. We want to abolish. Cornel's here, so he's making me feel like the old church days, but Howard Thurman, in The Growing Edge, what did he say? He said, never scale down your aspirations to the facts that are the level of your immediate experience. In other words, we don't have to be prisoner of an event. As a Christian, that meant we don't have to be prisoner to the events of the cross. Right? That doesn't have the final word on life. But in this world, it means we don't have to be prisoner to the events of our life. We ain't got to be prisoner to a policy. We ain't got to be prisoner to a two-party system. We ain't got to be party to the belief that reform is the only thing when we have revolution as the most viable option. We don't have to be prisoner of the moment. We can win. We will win. And that is what keeps us going. That's the only thing that's ever kept us going. And we've always fought. And when we fought, we won. And we'll continue to win.
We fight, we win, y'all. We fight, we win. So, what I want to do.
Well, that definitely was a powerful statement from our brother Mark Lamont Hill. I am so glad that you were able to be here with me this grand morning. I want to say hello to everyone out there listening and who will listen later. That has been our News, Facts, and Comments Sunday special reporting. I want to thank you for tuning in once again. Please let us know what you thought about Dr. Cornel West. He is a presidential candidate for 2024. He is down with reparations for African Americans, so-called Native Americans. When I say Native Americans, I'm talking about those with melanin in their skin, right? The Aboriginals, might I say. So he's with that for us. He's also saying that we need to be more forceful in our call for a ceasefire against the brothers and sisters out in Gaza. So once again, this has been News, Facts, and Comments Sunday Rap Session. I want to thank you once again for joining in. Let me know how you feel about Dr. Cornel West's presidential run, as well as the powerful statement that Mark Lamont Hill made there in closing. With that being said, I want to go ahead and say I thank you so very much for watching. Tune in again on next Sunday, where we'll be back at our regular scheduled time, which is at 5 p.m. every Sunday. News, Facts, and Comments Sunday Rap Session. I am Achoti Speaks. Thanks for tuning in, and have a wonderful, wonderful day. That's a wrap.
One for the money, you know what it is. Two for the show, yeah, we shut it down. Three, just to make sure you ready. Four, let them know that we run this town. One for the money, you know what it is. Two for the show, yeah, we shut it down. Three, just to make sure you ready. Four, let them know that we run. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. You are now tuned in to the greatest. The greatest of all time. The greatest of all time. I'm gonna be better. I'm gonna be I'm gonna be better. I'm gonna be better. I'm gonna be better. I'm gonna be I'm gonna be better. I'm gonna be better. One for the money, you know what it is. Two for the show, yeah, we shut it down. Three, just to make sure you ready. Four, let them know that we run this town. One for the money, you know what it is. Two for the show, yeah, we shut it down. Three, just to make sure you ready.